you're expecting a package in the mail, something that you are eagerly anticipating, sometimes you look out there towards the mailbox. This happened to us this week as, a package was planning to arrive, and the kids were like, kept looking, is it here yet? Is it here yet? Is it here yet? And when it finally comes, you get very excited. Now, I'll paint this as a scenario. Let's say that there is a lady who knows that her boyfriend is off overseas, and he is not able to come back, but they've been dialoguing about their relationship and talking about moving the relationship forward. And then she is eagerly anticipating that there might be something coming in the mail that would indicate that that relationship is moving forward a little bit. So she's looking out there, and then she sees the mailman coming up, and so she walks out, and the mailman says, well, I have a package for you. Lo and behold, she sees who this is from, and it happens to be the right size, that this could be the box, that there might be a ring in there. And, there would be a letter attached to it because he wants to move the relationship forward, but he's not there present with her, and so she gets this, and she's so excited. Now, what is she going to do to the person who delivered this mail? Okay? Maybe a thank you, possibly a smile, but she's not going to build a statue as a monument to the postal worker. All right? She's not going to get down on her knees and say, oh, I'm so excited. Thank you for delivering this. And she's certainly not going to kiss the mailman. Right? What we're going to look at this morning is how sometimes people can get things out of order. That they can seek to kiss the mailman instead of giving their affection and attention to the person that sent the package, to the person that sent the message. All right? So we're in the book of Hebrews. You can turn to Hebrews chapter 1 is where we're going to be this morning. Now, we started last week laying a foundation with the first 4 verses of the chapter, and we're going to go ahead and review those this morning. But as we go, I want to give you a thought in your mind that is going to help to guide you through this message, because this is a theologically very deep, very heavy message. Okay? We're going to be looking at some scriptures and laying some very deep what's called Christology, the theology of who Christ is. Okay? But as we go through, when we learn these truths about who Jesus is, I don't want you to lose your perspective and think, okay, I am racking up a bunch of knowledge, but what am I going to do with this? Okay? Because the first century Jews here, we are going to see, we get things a little bit out of order, and we're exalting some things higher than what they should, and things that should only be a place of exaltation that should only belong to Jesus Christ. Okay, specifically, we're going to see how they did this with angels. They were elevating angels much higher than what they should. Now, most of us, I'm assuming, are not in that boat. We're not going to be tempted to have too high of a view of angels that would somehow kind of displace the place that Christ is supposed to have. But I want you to look at the principle of this and how you can easily put a number of different things in the place that should only be occupied by Jesus. Some of us could do that with the church or a particular pastor or teacher that we align ourselves with. Or we could do it with our roles of ministry. I mean, church, pastor, teacher, ministry, all these things are good, and God has given them to us, but He has given them to us in service to our relationship with Jesus Christ, to drawing us close to Him. So I want you to be aware and think through your life. Is there any area, Lord, where I am lifting something up, even maybe something that is very good that you have given me, a relationship, another person, an opportunity that I have elevated higher than what I should, and it is distracting or even displacing the place that should only belong to Jesus in my life. Okay, so that's where we're headed with this. Now we're going to start by looking at verses 1 through 4 to just kind of refresh where we're going. All right? Hebrews 1:1. God, after He spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days He has spoken to us in His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, through whom also He made the world. And He is the radiance of His glory and the exact representation of His nature, and upholds all things by the word of His power. When He had made purification of sins, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much better than the angels, as He has inherited a more excellent name than they. So we're talking about angels. That's where we're kind of headed, and this is going to be one of the first things that the author hits. And it says Jesus is superior. Jesus is better than the angels. He's certainly better than the prophets, which we already saw, but he's also better than the angels. Now, what are angels? Angels, we have kind of a misperception in our culture, partly because of popular artwork or even ancient artwork that has shown the angels, these winged figures with halos and this nice permed hair that's cascading down their shoulders and all that. Okay? We get these images from stained glass windows, from ancient artwork, from modern day, movies or cartoons as to what an angel looks like. We're going to see a little bit more of what they are, but angels are spiritual beings. We know that they've been around at least since the Garden of Eden, okay? Because when Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden, there was an angel that was put there to guard the garden against them. They probably predate the creation of mankind. The angels are spirits, and that they are spirits that have been created by God, and we're going to see that they have a specific role, or a couple of roles, in creation, in relationship to us, in relationship to God, okay? But I was going to title this message this morning, Jesus, He's No Angel. Okay, but I thought the whole idea with the mailman would be a little bit more getting at the essence of where we're heading with it. But keep in mind, Jesus is not an angel. Okay, so who is he? Well, let's read verses 5 through 7 for starters. For to which of the angels did he, that's God the Father, ever say, "You are my son, today I have begotten you. And again I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me. And when he again brings this firstborn into the world, he says, let all the angels of God worship him. And of the angels, he says, who makes his angels winds and his ministers a flame of fire." So the first thing we see about Jesus is that he is the Son. Jesus is the Son. You've got space in your sermon notes if you want to write these down. Now, Son is a relational term. A name, okay, it says that he, in verse 4, that he received a name more excellent than that of the angels. Well, what is that name? The name is Son. Son represents a certain amount of relationship. A name typically shows a relationship. So, when I met Amanda, she was Amanda. Well, eventually, she became girlfriend, eventually became fiance, eventually she became wife. Okay, she had different names based on the nature of our relationship. Here, the second person of the Trinity is called Son. This is the relationship that he has with the Father. Now, the term Son can have a range of meaning. It can mean descendant of. It can mean a person who has a particular characteristics. In the Old Testament, in the book of Job, we see that actually angels are even referred to as sons of God. Job 1:6, it talks about how the angelic this angelic group of spiritual beings got together and they were called the sons of God. But whereas those might be a son of God, like as in something that was created by God, Jesus is the Son of God. And we know from other portions of Scripture, particularly in Colossians, where it talks about the Son was not created. The Son, and we're going to find out a little bit more about that later. He is the unique Son of God, the one-of-a-kind Son of God in a way that nobody else is. Okay? For which of the angels did God ever say, you are my Son, today I have begotten you? That's not a word we use a lot, but that means to become the father of. Okay? The relationship between God the Father, first person of the Trinity, and God the Son, second person of the Trinity. There is a relationship in that way. Now, Jesus is not only the Son, he is also, we see in verse 6, he is the firstborn. The firstborn. And when we think firstborn, don't necessarily think birth order. Okay? As in, you've got the first child born, the first child created. Okay? Firstborn has a different meaning here. Okay, now to give you an idea as to what this means, I want to go back to Exodus chapter 4. Because I want to combat the idea that would easily come in the fact that Jesus was one day born or created, and before that he did not exist. That is not the case. So Exodus chapter 4, and we're going to look at verse 22. This is Moses speaking to actually, God telling Moses what to speak to Pharaoh. It says, "You shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn." So was Israel in existence before this? Yes. Israel had been around, but Israel as a nation has a particular relationship with God as his firstborn. In the Middle Eastern culture of that day, the firstborn son had a unique place of inheritance. He would receive more inheritance than his brother, the younger brothers. He had a place of preeminence. He was going to inherit the role of family leadership. So when we hear firstborn, think of like first place, as in like preeminence, place of honor. Okay? Now, let's go now to Psalm 89, because we have to understand what this idea of firstborn means. This is going to be in relationship to King David. So Psalm 89, I'm going to read you verse 20, and then we'll skip down a little farther. I have found David my servant, with my holy oil I have anointed him. I've chosen him. Now jump down now to verses 26 and 27. He will cry to me, you are my Father, my God, and the rock of my salvation. I also shall make him my firstborn, the highest of the kings of the earth. Now if you remember David's story, David was the youngest of 8 brothers. He was not the firstborn. But God chose him and said, I am making you the firstborn. But the firstborn of what? The first among the kings of the earth. He wasn't the first one in existence of the kings of the earth. He was placed into the first place, the highest place. And so when we read about Jesus back in Hebrews, that he was the firstborn, don't think about birth order. Think about place of prominence, place of honor, place of leadership. He is the firstborn. Status and honor. Now, prophecy, we know, sometimes has multiple fulfillments. In the Old Testament, when you see us talking about David, well, this is also a reference looking forward to Jesus. Sometimes you have a contemporary fulfillment when the Old Testament was first written. Sometimes you have a secondary fulfillment in Jesus Christ and his first coming. Sometimes you even have a third fulfillment when Jesus returns at the end of time. And so here, there's kind of a double meaning with that. It's also a reference to Jesus. Now, Jesus, though, is worthy of more than just honor. More than just honor. And we are going to see this. He is also worthy not just because he is the firstborn, but because he is God himself. He is God. Verse 8. But of the Son, he says, okay, comparing with the angels, but of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Of the Son, he says, your throne, O God. Here is one of the clearest references in the New Testament. Jesus is not just the Son of God. Jesus is God. So this is one of them to like bookmark in your Bible or underline or mark that in the margin, because there will be times that people will challenge the notion that Jesus Christ is actually God. Well, did he ever claim to be God? Did he ever say it just outright, or did he just kind of hint at it? Of the Son, you are God. That's what God the Father says of him. Now, he is not just given a name. He is not just called Son, firstborn. He has the nature of God, okay, but he is also the ruler. The ruler. Now, we stopped in verse 8 there. Let me read it again, and we'll go into verse 9. But of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Righteousness, a righteous scepter is the scepter of his kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated lawlessness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your companions. Jesus has been given a position of authority. The position of authority. He is the one who is sitting on the throne. This is who Jesus is. He is ruler of all creation. Now why? Well, in part because he is the creator. He is the creator. Okay, go on to verse 10. And you, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all become old like a garment, and like a mantle you will roll them up. Like a garment they will also be changed, but you are the same, and your years will not come to an end. Back in the beginning, okay, Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, the heavens and the earth. Who created? God the Father created, but how did he create? He created through the Son. The Son is the one who actually did the creating. Now, I think we talked about this last week, but you have an architect, a person who designs. We got all these fancy buildings around our town, but who's the person who actually builds it? The architect's not the one usually laying the bricks and swinging the hammer. Okay? Jesus was intimately involved, closely hands-on involved with the creation of the world. How did God create the world? He spoke it. What is Jesus called in John chapter 1? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. How did God create the universe? He did it through Jesus, okay? That was John 1:1. I didn't put these into the PowerPoint. That just kind of came to me now. I'm going to turn back to Colossians. This one's also not in there, okay? Colossians 1, I'm going to say, start in verse 15. He, the Son, is the image of the invisible God, the Father, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, both in heavens and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Jesus is the creator. So he is able to be the ruler in part because he's the one that started it all. And what does it say back in Hebrews chapter 1 about him? This creation, there's going to be a time when it gets rolled up. It gets folded up. It gets put away, just like a garment. You take it off, you fold it up, you put it away. It gets discarded, pushed to the side. This creation that we have around us is one day going to come to an end. Is Jesus Christ going to one day come to an end? Nope. He predates it. He created it. He sustains it. He's going to be the one it's going to come to an end, and he's still going to be around. As a matter of fact, there's even going to be a new creation after that. He is the one who is over all. Now, again, what's the author doing here? He's saying, angels didn't do this. This is what Jesus did. This is who Jesus is. This is what Jesus is doing. This is what Jesus is going to do. The angels don't measure up to any of that. Now, last point here for your outline. Jesus is also the victor. Verse 13. But to which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet? One of the things that would happen, Isaiah, can I borrow you for a second? Okay, just we'll make this a little bit more visual and vivid. Okay, so come on up here. Now, if we were in conflict with one another, okay, and our nations were fighting against each other, I'm the king of one, he's the king of the other, and I defeated his army. Okay, to show everybody else that I have won, here's what I'm going to do. Okay, he would be forced down to the ground. I'm going to let you do so voluntarily. Okay. Okay, now go ahead and kind of go a little bit more flat. Can you do that for me? Okay, and then I'm going to take and I'm going to put my foot on his neck. Now, I'm not putting any pressure there, but this is showing I'm the victor, he's the subservient. He's the one that's down here. He is the footstool for my feet. Okay, Isaiah, you can go ahead and get up. Thanks, bud. We'll take you to the chiropractor later. Sit at my right hand, God the Father says, until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. There is going to come a time when every enemy has been defeated. Jesus is going to reign victorious. To which of the angels did he ever say that? God's never said that to the angels. He's only said it to the Son. Now, to the Jewish people here who would be tempted through their theology, and they kind of interpreted the roles that the angels had throughout history. They helped in the giving of the law and the covenant at Mount Sinai and all this. Because angels were involved in all that, they're like, wow, these angels are great. And yes, angels are greater and more powerful than we are, but they are never to take the place that only belongs to the Son, that only belongs to Jesus. As a matter of fact, in verse 14, it says here at the end of the chapter, are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve on behalf of those who are going to inherit salvation? And what did it say? I think it was back up in verse 7, okay? He makes his angels winds and his ministers, or his servants, flames of fire. So what are angels? Angels are servants. They are servants of God, and they have been sent to serve us. So if you want a job description for angels, there's two things in this passage that we see the angels do. They worship God, and they serve us. Now, it's not like they're servants that we command here and there. They're servants of God sent to serve the saints. So angels worship God, and they serve the saints. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the relationship with God, there's actually a similarity between us and the angels. And we get to see this in Revelation chapter 22. Now, if anybody would understand that angels are not worthy of worship, it should be one of Jesus' apostles, right? Like the apostle John. Okay? But in Revelation 22, verses 8 and 9, okay, after John had received this incredible revelation of all that God was going to do in the future and what God was doing now and how it was all going to end, it says in verse 8, I, John, am the one who heard and saw these things. And when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel who showed me these things. But he said to me, do not do that. I am a fellow servant of yours and of your brethren the prophets and of those who heed the words of this book. Worship God. Angels are servants. We are servants. I am your fellow servant. Sometimes one servant will serve another servant, if that's what God directs. Angels have been sent to serve those who are going to inherit salvation. Now, inherit salvation, we think of, oh yeah, Jesus saved me at the cross. True, I've already got that. We're going to inherit salvation. Inheritance is something that's yet to come. There's going to be a time when our salvation is fully realized, when God comes back, Jesus comes back, and he takes us to be his own. He rescues us, when he raises us from the dead. When we get our new bodies, we get to live with him through all of eternity. We are going to inherit salvation, and in the meantime, while we wait for that, he has sent his angels to help us out. Angels protect. We see that in the scriptures. Angels will give messages. Angels will execute judgment. There's all kinds of ways that angels will work, but angels are servants. If I have a servant, what can I do? I can tell that servant to go to this place. I can tell that servant to take you a message. I can go tell that servant, I want you to go and rescue this person. The angels are servants. They are fellow servants sent to serve us. So, Hebrew Christians, you guys need to know, Jesus, he is not an angel. He is better than the angels. The angels are under him along with you. Get your attention up there. Worship him. Now, I struggled. What are we going to do with this message? How do we make this practical? It has fantastic theology and truth that we need to know. Okay, we don't want to get ourselves off track. Oh, Jesus was just a good teacher. He was a prophet. You know, he wasn't God. He wasn't man. You know, there's all kinds of falsehoods that we could believe about Jesus. But I know that many of you know what the truth is about Jesus. And this just builds that foundation. But what difference does this make in the way I conduct myself? Well, we had to look at what's the temptation for these Hebrew Christians. They had turned to Jesus, but they were being tempted to be pulled back to the old ways of thinking, to the things that would have elevated things higher to the position that only Jesus should have, or trying to bring Jesus down to being just parallel with the angels. In the past, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many times and in various ways. Okay? He speaks through angels. The word angel actually means messenger. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by his Son. Jesus comes, he supersedes all of that. So what would you be tempted to re-elevate to the position that only should be held by Jesus in your life? What would you be tempted to try and bring Jesus down to be parallel with? There's many things that are possibilities. I'll throw out a few of them. Search your hearts. Lord, is there any of these that are tempting me? Okay? One is that we can elevate an institution of man. Okay? Now I say an institution of man. God's the one that built the church, but we could look at our church or a particular denomination, and we could elevate that so high that our allegiance becomes to that group or institution or organization instead of to Christ. My allegiance is so strong to this that I'm going to adhere to that even when Jesus is telling me something different. I mean, we've seen that happen even within our own church before. Okay? It's possible that we could do that with a particular teacher or pastor. You know, it could be, me as your pastor, or it could be one of the teachers that you listen to online or the podcast or TV or whatever. It's like, oh, this teacher said it, so therefore that's what I need to do. Instead of searching the scriptures like we talked about last week. We could elevate a person to a place of authority in our lives that only should be held by Jesus Christ. We could even elevate the the scriptures to a point of biblio-idolatry, where we idolize the Bible instead of seeing the Bible as something that instructs us and points us to Jesus so that he is the one who receives our worship. We can look at our ministries, our places of service. Oh, I have a place of significance because I serve in this ministry, and we hold that ministry, that way of serving, up so high that we cling to that instead of saying, God, I'm doing this open-handedly. You can take it out of my life if you want, because my worship belongs only to you. We could even do this with a person in our own family. I am so committed to my spouse or my son or daughter or grandchild that we get things out of order and realize that instead of loving that person as an expression of our worship, we start elevating that person as the one that we're most dedicated to. If our love for another draws us away from our love for Jesus, it's getting out of order. We're not worshiping the way that we need to. We are not keeping Christ elevated. So, we're going to prepare to have our closing song. I want to ask you a question. Is there anything in your life that is creeping up in your own eyes, in your own estimation, to that point that's only supposed to be held by Jesus? Is there any way that you are trying to pull Jesus down to a lower level? Like apparently these Jewish Christians were, to seeing, Jesus as maybe parallel with the angels or close in value, the same as them. Is there any way that Jesus is not keeping his place of firstborn, preeminence in your life? If so, this is the time to say, God, I'm making that right. I am putting Jesus back where he belongs. I repent of elevating others. I repent of bringing him down. Jesus and him alone. He has my worship. So if you need someone to pray with you, I'll be right down front. You're welcome to slip in beside me. I can pray with you. You can just pray there in your seats. But this is a time of putting Jesus back where he belongs.